What?
11:50 till 11:50.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nidhi Namane Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacharya Charane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Josdi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we celebrate the appearance days of the avatars, Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We don't celebrate their disappearance days. Even though, of course, they do have a disappearance, I don't think the dates are recorded anywhere. But we celebrate the appearance and the disappearance of the acharyas and great devotees of the Lord. The understanding in both cases, of course, is that the disappearance really isn't a death, because as the Lord has an eternal body, he simply disappears and he goes somewhere else, either the spiritual world or he's in another planet or another universe, carrying out similar activities. So similarly, the great devotees of the Lord also, though they disappear, and even if they have material bodies, those bodies perish still. They do have a spiritual body, and in that body, they continue to serve the Lord, either in some universe or in the spiritual world. So there is no misfortune in either case. Their activities are eternal. However, because we often treasure the presence of the great devotees, when we are separated from them, then we will feel grief. So this is natural, and we see that in relation to even the Supreme Lord himself. When Krishna disappears, then people grieve. So we have the Pandavas grieving after they hear about the disappearance of Krishna, even though, of course, they know he's also eternal because they're feeling separation from him and his association. Then they lament. So when Srila Prabhupada disappeared, then there was great lamentation, not because he is gone in one sense, but we do have that separation from him. So that was felt by his immediate disciples. They had a relationship with him, and they would speak to him or write letters to him, communicate with him, whatever. And then when he's gone, then that they can no longer do that. So they feel some grief because of that. In the case of second generation devotees who are disciples of Prabhupada's disciples, then they never had a direct relationship. Some may have met Prabhupada personally, but they never took the initiation from him, and most probably never met him at all. So their relationship is indirect. So in one sense, they don't feel that same lamentation on his disappearance because they never met him in the first place. So they never spoke to him or whatever in the first place. However, we do have that understanding that because he did disappear, then we have the misfortune of never meeting him and never having his association. So in that sense, his disappearance means that because of that disappearance, we never got to meet him. So we can lament for that. So that is the lamentation part of the disappearance of Srila Prabhupada. We feel that sadness because his presence is missing. If he were present, then it would solve a lot of problems. We often have controversies in ISKCON. Should we do this or should we do that? But actually, there's no controversy. If you ask Prabhupada, you say, do this or don't do this, and that's finished. There's no controversy at all. But when he's not there, we're not sure. We don't know what to do in many cases. Some things are very clear, other things are not so clear. So therefore there's controversy, we don't know. And it makes it a little more difficult for us. We have to solve the problem, make a decision when we don't know what Prabhupada would have done. Some people say he may say this, some people may say that, so we don't know. So then we have to come to some sort of decision based upon using our intelligence, scripture, and experience with Srila Prabhupada, etc., and hope that we make a proper decision. So there's that disadvantage of us not being present at the moment. However, the positive aspect is that in the case of Srila Prabhupada, he was aware that his disappearance could create problems, because he saw that in the case of previous spiritual movements, and even in the case of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there was problems after his disappearance. So that's often the case. And we can see that with even modern movements, other spiritual movements that come from India or elsewhere. When the leader disappears, generally that movement becomes very weak and has many problems. So Prabhupada was aware of that, and whatever he established, he did not want that to be destroyed. Rather, he wanted it to become stronger and increase. So that was his great desire. We see, of course, with spiritual movements, some will succeed and they keep growing and growing. So that's what happened, for instance, with the Christian church. It started out very small. There was one man in Jerusalem preaching away. Just one person and a few followers. And in his lifetime, how many followers he got? Not so many, maybe a few thousand or something like that, but enough to disturb the priesthood and the Romans, so they crucified him or whatever. So that was the beginning, a few thousand. But somehow it increased that it's covered the world. But that's taken like 2,000 years. So some movements, they increase and they stay. Others, they don't stay, they disappear. And that's what happens to most movements, they disappear. So Prabhupada didn't want this movement to disappear. Of course, it's not a new movement. So unlike Christianity, which was new, or Buddha's teachings, which were new, the Prabhupada was not inventing something or coming out with some new philosophy. He was simply passing on what had been started by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sankirtan movement. So in that sense, it's a little different. So he's continuing that line with the movement. But even then, he was not satisfied that, okay, Lord Chaitanya's movement is surviving. He also wanted that his organization that he established, that is ISKCON, should survive and grow and grow. That was his great desire. That, of course, is, you can say, by experience, that's what he desired. And he took some precautions to do that. And, of course, one of the great safeguards is that he emphasized knowledge. So even if he's not present, his books would be there to represent whatever he represented. He spent a long time, a lot of time, translating and commenting on Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhagavad Gita, and other works, in order that the movement would survive and prosper, and become greater than it was at the moment. Uniquely, of course, unlike many movements, which kind of fizzle out after the leaders disappear, Prabhupada's movement grew. It grew not for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. It's continued to grow as the years go on, which is a little bit unique. Of course, we can attribute that to Lord Chaitanya's mercy and Sankirtan, etc. But part is also due to Prabhupada's influence. Because we see other Gaudiya groups are also there. Do they grow to that extent? And we say, no, they don't. After their leader disappears, again, they disappear again. But we see that Srila Prabhupada's movement somehow or other, even though we don't have one prominent leader at the moment, still it has succeeded and it keeps growing. So that's the great credit to Srila Prabhupada. To do that, Prabhupada put the emphasis upon himself being the founder Acharya of the movement of ISKCON. And therefore he gets a very special place of worship and respect for all the devotees, even if they're not his direct disciples. So that was one way of assuring the unity of the movement rather than having many divisions. And of course a way of continuing the movement into the future by taking the inspiration from Srila Prabhupada. So these were some of the strategies that Prabhupada had for the growth of the movement. Personally, he was not interested in getting worshipped or whatever. That's not his aim. The goal is to spread Lord Chaitanya's movement and have it increase all the time. But to do that, you need a strong organization. So there were other organizations, they did not succeed. So Srila Prabhupada made that attempt, and within his lifetime he did something, and he wanted that movement to continue to expand, etc. So he devised his own particular methods of doing that. So it is to his credit that the movement has survived and has grown since that time. Originally, of course, if we examine the number of devotees and what they were doing, etc., in those days, actually, you see, it is quite not so many devotees, actually. There's more devotees in Calcutta or more devotees in Bombay than the whole world at that time. How many devotees? Maybe 5,000 devotees total in the whole world at that time. Many of which didn't have second initiation, some of who had first initiation, some no initiation. Maybe there's 5,000 or something initiated devotees at least first initiation. Maybe that's the maximum. But that's not so much in the modern world. So if you take Delhi or Bombay or whatever, they have over 5,000 in one city. Whatever, yeah. So many places like that. So not so. Now the number of devotees is much greater than at that time. And of course, the devotees also did not have everything. It started out, they only had 3 volumes. First canto of Bhagavatam was there, Prabhupada translated, and he's translated the Bhagavad Gita eventually when he was in America. And then Krishna book, and then finally he continued Bhagavatam up to 10th canto, but it was coming out bit by bit. So in the 1970s, for instance, the whole Bhagavatam wasn't there. Maybe you get 1 volume at a time would come out. So we get to the 5th canto or the 6th canto as we go up for year after year. So in the beginning, there are only 3 books available. In the very beginning, only 1 book available, maybe the Bhagavatam, and then came out the Bhagavad Gita, etc. So not so many books available. And it was also time-consuming to make those books even, so they had to establish a whole setup with BBT, and they got their own printing presses and this and that. So it was a big endeavor to do all the printing, etc. And they had so many people employed doing all of this. Nowadays, it's much easier to do all of that, and much less expensive as well, and much quicker. But at that time, it was quite problematic. There were no computers at that time, 1970s. No computers. So I suppose it was probably still, you had to type everything. I was typing. I probably typed up the Bhagavad Gita on a typewriter, not even an electric typewriter, regular hand typewriter like that. So very, very slow process. And then Prabhupada would take things to the printer and then correct it, and then they typeset everything with these little metal alphabets like this, and then he would look at it and correct it. Then they would have to take the little letter out and put a new letter in to correct it. It's a very tedious process. Well, that was happening even, when we were printing books, the first books also, in like Easy Journey to Other Planets and stuff here, and that still we're doing with the printing press. But then offset came and whatever. But even then, cumbersome, whatever. So, but as things have improved since that time, so quite difficult at that time in the beginning. So not many books, difficult to process, etc. Recordings were, you could make movies, which were very expensive, or if you have an 8mm, very primitive. There were no videos. Tape recorders, they were this big. You had to carry, Prabhupada had to carry around this big tape recorder with this servant had to carry this big tape recorder, 10 pounds of tape recorder with him to record things, on tapes. So then it turned into cassette after Prabhupada's disappearance. I think it was cassettes came, little portable things came. They got smaller and smaller and smaller, like that. So that was also difficult. Even recording and photographing, videoing, all that was very difficult compared to now. But in spite of that, Prabhupada managed to, produce his books and sufficient quantity of books, and tried to make sure that they were a very, very good quality and that they would last into the future. So he was looking into the future, not of what he had accomplished, but rather what would happen after his disappearance. So we should remember all of this as the contribution of Srila Prabhupada in establishing this movement. As I said in the beginning days, Prabhupada came to India when there was nothing, and no land or anything, and then he had to struggle to get land, and he had no money, so he had to take the money from America, donations from American, when they distributed books and etc. there, take that money to buy properties in Mayapur and Bombay and other places. Therefore the movement was a little bit unstable at that time, but Prabhupada was trying to make it permanent, and therefore he made he had a vision of permanent centers like in Mayapur and Bombay and Delhi, etc., in India itself, which would be very, very permanent. So he had that vision also. So whatever we have today is based upon those beginnings in which Srila Prabhupada made strategies to continue the movement into the future. Whatever we have now, whatever we take for granted actually is a result of what was, a struggle in the very beginning. We have a lot that is easy for us at this moment. So now our preaching has become somewhat easier. We have more facilities. The books are readily available. And not just any, we can take any book and we can consult it with modern computer technology and internet, etc. So the facilities are much, much greater now, much easier than they were even 10 years ago, what to speak of 50 years ago. So we can take advantage of all of this, but at the same time, we should also remember to keep it in line with the movement that Srila Prabhupada established. Somehow or other, he put all this endeavor to make this movement, so we should somehow keep it together and not break it into pieces. So that is the effort that we have to make. There'll always be differences between different individuals, but nevertheless, we have to find some means of cooperating within that, tolerating the differences or acknowledging the differences and cooperating and still having a unified movement. So that is where the challenge comes. So we can continue. But as we see with even great movements, they may divide. So the Christians divided into many movements. Some movements got completely suppressed. new little movements keep popping up and they get suppressed or whatever. That happened many, many times. And then finally there was a big division into the Protestants and the Catholics. And then there was more divisions coming up. And then the Catholics themselves divided into different groups like the Franciscans and the, different groups of Catholics also. So it's been sort of constant thing due to variations, because people become different, and over time and place, whatever, there are differences of how to do things. So therefore, we get these divisions taking place. So the whole problem is how to keep the unity of the movement and still allow for some differences within it. So that's the great challenge that we have. We have to experiment a little probably to do that, but nevertheless we have to see that it's there rather than just start new movements which are separate. So that should be in our mind also, that though there are differences, we should still try to keep the movement together somehow or other rather than to break off and have different movements. And the reason for that is the more little movements we have, then the weaker the main movement becomes. Whereas if we have one strong movement, then that is more likely to survive into the future. So that is the strategy that Srila Prabhupada had, and we should understand that and respect that and try to support that in all ways that we can, acknowledging at the same time that though there are differences, that we have to keep the unity of the movement intact, and that would be pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. So that is what we should keep in mind. So though he has disappeared, it is and of course we lament because we don't have his personal presence. The nature of time itself is such that everything gets disappearing in one sense. But spiritually speaking, of course, we know nothing has disappeared. So whatever we lack by his personal presence, the physical presence, we have to make up by internal presence, which means we have to develop spiritually. So if we develop spiritually enough, then we will not feel Srila Prabhupada's absence. Just as we're separated from Krishna, but if we advance, then we get to see Krishna. And that's our goal. So if we advance enough also, then we get the presence of Srila Prabhupada. So, therefore, along with this understanding that we have to give respect to Prabhupada and respect his principles, we should also spiritually advance enough so that we can begin to feel the presence of Srila Prabhupada, and in that way we will also make proper decisions rather than concocted decisions. So that's the way in which we can fulfill Prabhupada's vision. So this has been, of course, a problem that will manifest as an organization, and the GBC has thought about this also and has various strategies for doing that. But the individual also should have the proper understanding of Prabhupada's intentions and try to take some consideration of this in their preaching and how they view other devotees and how they preach to other devotees, keeping in mind this idea of unity there in spite of the diverse opinions. So if we can keep the movement together, then that is what will please Srila Prabhupada. So usually on appearance days and disappearance days, we glorify the person, so we glorify Srila Prabhupada. But then Prabhupada wrote in one of his offerings to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, what is the use of all of these fruits and flowers, this glorification, whatever, because you didn't do what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted. You divided up your whole movement. So what's the use of all of that? So the glorification should also stand with our actions, that somehow we glorify Srila Prabhupada, but then we also have to ensure the unity of the movement, the fidelity of the movement, the strength of the movement, and its progress and expansion in the future. And if we do that, that is what leads to Srila Prabhupada. It's not the fruits and the flowers and the worship and whatever. It's the result. What was Srila Prabhupada's goal? He didn't want glorification for himself. That's not the point. The only reason he insisted himself as the founder Acharya was so that the movement would stay together and expand Lord Chaitanya's movement. So if that is done in the proper way, with fidelity to Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we can keep expanding nicely, harmoniously and cooperatively, then we've succeeded in pleasing Srila Prabhupada. So that's what we should do. That's our glorification, if we can somehow keep that in our mind at all times.
Maharaj, you mentioned that in the initial days, there were few devotees, few books, and now as the movement has expanded, there are many devotees and many books distributed, and there are many Diksha Gurus and Siksha Gurus. There may be a feeling that they may lose respect to Prabhupada and they focus more on the Diksha Gurus and the Siksha Gurus. How to maintain the Prabhupada Siksha culture throughout so that Prabhupada be
Yeah. Well, this is always a problem. The emphasis on Diksha Guru, because Scripture says you worship your Guru like God, etc. But if we look closely, of course, that doesn't refer to one Guru even. And it doesn't even refer to Diksha Guru, because most of these statements are coming from Upanishads. And the Upanishads are speaking of the Vedic Guru. And the Vedic Guru is one who taught you with the Gurukul, and he was not your Diksha Guru. Your father was your Diksha Guru because he gave you the Gayatri Mantra to learn the Vedas. So actually they're all Shiksha Gurus. And it may not be one, it could be many. But so that idea of surrendering to the Guru, giving everything to the Guru is next to God or like God or whatever, worship him like God, applies equally to Diksha and Shiksha Guru. So, of course, that is not to deny that we must worship the Diksha Guru as non-different from the Supreme Lord, but then that applies equally with the Shiksha Guru, and it also applies to Srila Prabhupada, who is also a Shiksha Guru. So then we have to treat many people like God, not one person. So the idea is not that it's solely we're worshiping one person. My Diksha Guru is the supreme entity. We're worshiping many people, and we're also worshiping Srila Prabhupada. So, though we worship everybody, it's also said in Krishna Bhajanamrita that if you give respect to the Father, but you give equal respect to his brothers, and the uncles or whatever like that, your uncles, and you give double respect to the grandfather. So everybody gets worship, but nevertheless the senior gets the more worship. So therefore you worship your Guru like God, but then double God for the founder Acharya. You worship him more. So that type of understanding should also be there. We don't just focus on the Diksha Guru. So that is a more mature understanding of the meaning of what a spiritual instruction, Shiksha, Diksha, etc. So that nevertheless we don't disrespect anybody, but nevertheless we have a special place for Srila Prabhupada, and that is why we give emphasis to his celebration of his appearance and his disappearance as well.
Many people found the business organization and they forgot the name of the founder. Prabhupada insisted that the founder should be there wherever his temple is open, in letterhead. And my point is how to maintain the Siksha culture Prabhupada ever, so that we don't how to maintain the mode of respecting Prabhupada forever, without forgetting.
That can only be done by constantly teaching that, I think. If people are aware of that, then we can do it. If nobody speaks about it, then of course nobody will do it. But if it's one of our basic teachings, then and it's inculcated in all the people who join our movement or have contact with our movement, then it becomes, we can say, natural. It's a fact that is accepted by everybody. So it has to become, let's say, publicized as a common knowledge for everyone.